One of the things that wealthy people do that are not in the process of losing their wealth, because there are a lot of people that are wealthy that are just losing their wealth, but people that are actually growing wealth, is that they're continually learning and they're devouring information. They look at networks and people and books and information. It's just things to be able to help them, and they'll be able to use this for the future.
Welcome to Truly Passive Income. I'm Neil Henderson.
And I'm Clint Harris. And today we are joined by Bronson Hill. So I'm excited about this because Bronson is a former medical sales professional, just the same way that I was. He pivoted into real estate syndication. He's raised over $45 million for alternative investments. He's the founder of Bronson Equity. He's a general partner in 2,500 plus multifamily units. He's the author of Rich Brain, How the Wealthy Change Their Brain to Change Their Bank Account. We'll talk about how high net worth investors can build cash flow outside of Wall Street and why mindset shifts are just as important as financial strategy. Bronson, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, really good, man. Excited to be here. Love talking about truly passive income. I know you said it's a little bit of an inside joke there. Nothing's truly passive, but there are more passive things you can do with your wealth.
Boy, have you come to the right place today, Bronson.
We're going to have a good talk.
So for the little bit that we know about you, tell us more and tell us what the audience doesn't know about you, what your background was, the type of medical sales, and then everything you're up to now.
So like you, I was a medical sales rep making good money and working super hard. And I realized I couldn't take vacations. And I met, physicians as well that were, and a couple cardiologists, another cardiologist you mentioned you're connected with, that these two guys made, several $1 million a year each. And they were working, which was great, but they were working 60 or 80 hours a week and they couldn't take vacations. And I just thought, that's not actually financial freedom, right? So financial freedom, people say financial freedom, but really I think for a lot of your listeners as well, we all want time freedom. We want to be able to have the money coming in. And as Warren Buffett says, learning how to make money while we sleep, right? So a lot of physicians, the very thing that makes them successful in their practice, testing and practicing, with your training and things like that, is it's hard to take the leap to actually invest passively in something that you've never done, or maybe you don't know somebody that's done. So it's a big change. But I did that. I did medical sales for 10 years, was an award-winning rep and enjoyed it, but also said, I want to do my own thing, want to have more control of my time. Was able to fire myself. That's in my first book behind me here. It became an Amazon bestseller, just about how do you replace your working income with passive income in 3 years or less. And I think a lot of your audience would be relevant because a lot of your audience would be able to do that with the income they're making. And so it's just, how do people get started in that? So I started raising capital for real estate, started to scale my wealth. I 20x my net worth in about 4 years. I had some great, phenomenal deals. Things went well. We had a couple of really struggling deals, especially in the real estate space. So I'm happy to talk about all of it. And it's all learning, all growth, and it's been a lot of fun.
What sort of medical device sales did you do? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I did a lot of physical therapy devices for about 4 or 5 years. And then the last 5 years I was in surgical. We did kind of radiology, oncology, ports and dialysis catheters. And at the end I was doing coronary atherectomy and orbital atherectomy for coronary and peripheral arteries.
You're a road warrior.
Yeah, not as much as you though, man. I'll tell you, those pacer reps, you guys worked way harder than we ever did. So,
man, if heart problems were a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 problem, it would be a whole different. Yeah. It would probably pay a lot less, but it would be a whole different lifestyle. That's great. So, tell us about the types of investors that you work with coming from that background. Are you having a lot of medical professionals, and then how do you bridge the gap? Like in medical sales, I think there's an inherent level of trust that physicians have to have in you in order to try your product. And a lot of times, in my experience, I found that trust does transfer to personal relationships and things outside of just sales and transaction base. But talk to me about what did that foray look like as you're dabbling into investment strategies on your own and empowering other people to do the same thing?
Yeah. So when I started, a lot of people have in their mind, they want to do something different, right? And it's like, do you just quit cold turkey and go start something? And it's, it's challenging. What do you do? There's usually a transitionary period where it's like, I'm doing this, I'm a medical sales guy, you can appreciate this, but then I'm also doing the other things on the side. And so talking about it was kind of sensitive to talk about at work a little bit. And it's just, there was some, I had to kind of wait until I had really built something substantial before I actually started posting stuff on LinkedIn and started putting things out there into the world. And then I had some, a boss say, hey, what's this post, or what are you doing here? And then start to question, because, the perception in sales really is reality. If they see you online, they're like, well, what are you doing here? Right. And even if you're meeting your number or whatever. So it's the sales. That's why a lot of people don't like sales, but obviously if you're geared like us, it is a relationship business. And it's really about helping people. Honestly, a lot of my first investors came from, I ran a local meetup in Los Angeles. We had about 40 to 60 people coming every month. So there's a difference between being an expert and being a leader. And so I was the guy at the front of the room asking dumb questions to where we were interviewing. And so that really built a lot of trust. But I think with people like, a lot of people hear the word sales or salesperson or sales rep, and they're just immediately turned off by it. And I can tell you really, because we've all had that experience, at a car lot or somewhere else where it's just not a high integrity profession. But I do think really good salespeople are not salesy, right? They build relationships, they help people, they really build trust. So sometimes saying no to somebody can be a really helpful conversation. Hey, this doesn't fit you, but maybe this other group over here can help. So I think that, like you said, over time, I think the problem that I found that a lot of professionals have is that to make more money, I've got to work more, or I've got to pick up another shift. I've got to do, a call. I've got to do all these things. And it's just, again, it's a totally different skill set. And in my book, Fire Yourself, I talk about this, that you have kind of like the regular income bucket, and then you've got the passive income bucket. And even if you're only growing your passive income by 5 or 10,000 a year, that's huge, because that means if God forbid something were to happen to you, you'd have some money coming in. You'd be able to kind of scale it over time, and typically those appreciate. So I think just the conversations, it's getting people, kind of out of their own way of just, hey, like I've only done this. And all my friends, they have a money manager, they've got somebody there, and why would you do anything different, right? But those things, and I was an investment advisor on the side before I started doing this, and I call myself a recovering investment advisor, an RIA now, not a registered investment advisor. But it's very easy to kind of get in the trap and feel like you're doing really well, which really you're basically just saving. There's a lot of hidden fees and other things involved as well. So I could go on a lot of rabbit trails, but I want to come back to your question there.
Let me ask you this. So you founded Bronson Equity. I know you're a GP in over 2,500 multifamily units, but did you start off deciding that you wanted to do your own deals as a general partner and doing them on the side? Or did you start off from the beginning, like, let me find a great operator and bring something to the table that they don't have, which is my sales background and my ability to communicate, the network that I have, the relationships that I have, and step into that as a general partner of, did you say, hey, I want to be the tip of the spear, I want to go operate these deals, or I want to find someone that's got great experience that's already doing this and find ways that I can be complementary? How did that come together?
Yeah, so I had a single family portfolio. I had 4 or 5 single families, and I realized it was a lot of work. And if I wanted to scale it up, it'd be another job. And so what I realized, learning about multifamily in particular, or real estate in particular, is larger deals. It's a team effort. Like one person rarely does 100-unit multifamily property by themselves, right? It's usually a team. There's one person's raising, one person's, everybody's contributing, but one person's working on asset management, or one person found the deal. And so it's a team effort. And so my first deal, I raised $100,000 for someone that I knew in my network, who I connected an investor to him, and I was able to raise my first. And then over the next 6 months, I didn't have a lot of traction. And then I found a partner that was more successful than me, that had a huge brand, and he was teaching people how to raise capital, but he wasn't really raising capital as much himself. And I said, what if we built this out and we did more here? And so while working my full-time job, I would take calls with investors, Zoom calls, and I'd be in the car, I'd be driving, I'd be, take a Tuesday off and do 20 calls on a Tuesday. I mean, just like I would just stack them up wherever, but I had 1,000 one-on-one phone calls over that next year and a half and raised 15 million. So that was kind of like raising a little bit with 100K and then kind of scaling up. And then after, the first 50 conversations, you don't know what you're doing, but by, 100 conversations, you know exactly how to have that conversation. So I do think it's very much a team effort. At least for me, that was really helpful to scale up.
And are you doing most of that through the co-GP model?
Yeah, mostly co-GP. Well, all the real estate stuff is primarily co-GP. And then now the last few years we've switched. One thing we found in real estate, it's harder to find cash flow because of higher rates, higher costs, higher taxes, all this stuff. And so we've shifted quite a bit to do businesses. So we're getting ready to close on a pretty high cash flowing e-commerce business. We've done some oil and gas, both on the drilling side as well as on owning the mineral rights, owning the land, which is kind of a much safer way to get into oil and gas. And there's some amazing tax benefits for both of those as well.
I saw ATMs on your list as well. Have you previously invested in an ATM opportunity?
Yeah, we had an ATM operator we're working with for a number of years. We're no longer working with them now, but we've done car washes, ATMs. We've done we have a VC deal. We've done some development, some like senior housing developments. We've done a variety of things. Yeah.
So Multifamily's had a pretty rough go the last couple of years. Well, let me rephrase that. And that's not an indictment on you or anybody else, but like commercial real estate has had a rough couple of years. Right? We've had significant economic headwinds. We had the fastest and highest rate increase in history. So for people that were exposed to bridge debt or variable rate, it obviously created a lot of challenges. And so for a little bit, multifamily has kind of had a bad rap just because a lot of people were victims of the leverage that were in their deals. And we had a lot of capital calls. We had a lot of paused distributions. And even though the deal fundamentals in a lot of cases made sense, the cost of the capital and the cost of the debt doesn't make sense. And in a lot of cases eliminated the cash flow. But the reality is we still have a housing shortage. We still have way more people than we have places to put them. That's not going away. We just came back from the best ever real estate conference in Salt Lake City this past weekend. And I was really surprised by how bullish people were on the multifamily space. And one of the sentiments that came out of the conference was, if you're still doing deals right now and over the last 2 years, you're a different breed. Those are the people that are in it for the long haul. We saw a lot of people's social media go dark. A lot of people stop doing deals, capital calls, distributions pause, things like that. But, who was it? Warren Buffett said, you can't tell who's skinny dip until the tide goes out. The reality is, I think that those tough economic headwinds exposed some people that had risk that they probably shouldn't have had given what the market threw at us. So I think that a lot of people shifted and are listening to the market. Hey, maybe multifamily isn't the place right now, right? Maybe it's industrial, man cave roll-up doors. Maybe it's strip malls. Maybe it's whatever it may be. We've seen a lot of pivots. Is that what you're doing? Are you looking at the market, what the market's giving us and pivoting? Or are you seeing operators and general partners pivot? How have you operated the last 24 to 36 months?
Yeah. So to be honest, like I said, we've had some challenges and it's been in the multifamily space. We've had some deals, capital calls, there's some real struggles there with partners. And again, I can say, well, I'm not the one who's doing asset management, the one primarily, but I chose to invest in this. And a lot of us, I think there are lessons in investing. You're never going to get it perfectly. And that's the challenge, I think, for a lot of professionals. We want to get it perfectly every time, but we're all going to learn. We're going to have learning experiences. And I think really what we come back to, and it's really three things. Having all these calls, I realized investors call for they reach out for one of three reasons, right? They're looking for cash flow, they're looking for appreciation, or they're looking for tax benefits. Those are pretty much the three reasons. There are other things people do. They do 1031s, other things, but that kind of falls into other categories. But again, I do think it is a great time for multifamily real estate for long term. If you can find a deal that makes sense, you have good debt. It's an out of favor asset. It was very in favor. Now it's out of favor, right? Warren Buffett says find the out of favor asset. So we need more. There's obviously a demand for it, but I'm not expecting like multifamily to cash flow over the next couple of years. Typically, like if you're buying a new multifamily. A lot of people that want to fire themselves, that want truly passive income, how they get it is they get cash flow. I know people that are worth $100 million or more, and they're looking for cash flow. Everybody's looking for cash flow. Somebody who's working a job, once they start to develop cash flow that covers their living expenses, I think that's the first financial freedom number, right? That rat race number. Hey, for me, it was around $6,000 a month. It wasn't a lot. I lived pretty simply, but even in LA, that was enough for me. Once I had that number covered, I was good. So I think that's really why we've shifted to go more of these cash flow things, just because we found, for example, in multifamily real estate, a cap rate, which is if you owned a property in cash, what percentage return would you get per year? So typically around a 5 to 7 right now, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower, but generally depending on the market. We're seeing in private businesses right now, they're selling for sometimes, 3 to 3.5 times of profit. So this is more like a 30 or 35 cap, right? So again, it's a different set of risks, a different operations, a different story there. But again, there are things that really provide incredible cash flow. Oil and gas is another one. A lot of these have a payback and there's risks involved, but with the right operator, right time, some of these are, 18 to 24 months, you get your principals back, right? Not any specific deal, just kind of sharing generally. And so there's different ways to do that. And then the tax benefits of oil and gas as well. It's one of the only ways that I know of that is easy for anybody to invest in. It's an accredited investor to reduce ordinary taxable income, right? And obviously, I'm not giving specific advice, seek your own tax help, but that's absolutely amazing, right? 85% is common where somebody invests, they can actually reduce their taxable income by that amount without being a real estate professional, which is magic.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Listen, it's not that rare for us to have questions and conversations about like the fundamentals of the multifamily market or operators of what's happening. But one of the things I want to talk about with you is that you've kind of taken it a lot farther into like inside the mind of the investor. And you also mentioned that sometimes you tell investors no. And I think that's the best way to establish a relationship, that there's no amount of money in the world that's more important than, you don't want to take money if it's not in alignment with what the goals for that investor is, because at the end of the day, you still have to take that phone call a year or two later, right? So you want to understand their goals and purpose and do things that are in alignment with that and not against that, right? One of the things that you've done is you've worked with a lot of different investors. You're unpacking what their drivers are. And the reality is, especially it's been obvious the last couple of years, syndication is not for everybody. And frankly, it's not for the faint of heart. If you need a guaranteed income, maybe do something FDIC insured, go get a savings account, whatever. You have to understand what you're getting into. So what do you see as the biggest mental blocks that are stopping some people for investing in syndication, specifically high earners that are really looking for that true financial independence? Like, what are some of the mindset problems that you see people running into? And then I think you see where I'm going. There's a whole different conversation to go from here about some of the studies and surveys that you've done, some of the books that you've done as well. So I want to get into that, but let's start with that question.
So I want to say one thing first. We'll get into mindset specifically, but I will say the most transformational relationship for a passive investor is another passive investor. And anybody listening can probably relate with this. You start talking with your family about money, or you start talking with your coworkers or colleagues, and they think that you're crazy. Like, why don't you do what we're doing? So what we created a group called the Wealth Forum, which is a mix of virtual and in-person events. We do kind of a quarterly in-person event, and just getting people in the room. They're like, hey, they're high net worth. Some of these are 10 to 30 million high net worth. Some are a couple million, but they get in, they start sharing information with each other, because as much as you're doing this show because you want to help people. We have the Mailbox Money Show, which is our podcast. It's like, we want to serve people, but we still want everybody to do our deals, right? We want to serve them in that way. And so, but another passive investor who can say, hey, I've worked with these guys for 10 years. They're awesome. Or, hey, I would never work with these guys over here. That's a transformational relationship. When we share tax strategy, when we share goals, we share things like that. And so getting those people in the room. So I think for listeners, if you don't have a network, you can find them sometimes in local meetups. The challenge with local meetups, and I ran one for 5 years, is, only a few people there are high net worth and are really kind of in the same places. So that's where finding, whether it's, our group and other groups out there. I don't know if you guys have a group that really does transform you. So it kind of goes with the mindset and some of these sayings of, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So if I want to grow in an area of my wealth or my health or my spirituality, I've got to ground people that are focused on those things. So stepping back, basically wrote this. The second book is called Rich Brain, and I wrote most of it. Then I realized I need to kind of really focus it in, but it really is on this mindset piece that really is. A lot of people, we have self-sabotaging behaviors. We have things we approach wealth with. So a lot of times there's lifestyle inflation, where we make more and then we start spending more. There's a competition around what kind of car I drive as a physician or whatever, and all those things. And so one of the big things, wealth worthiness, to me, some people develop it over time. So they go from making maybe, $200K out of fellowship or residency, or $500K, whatever that amount is. And then they kind of take little small jumps up. But other people, they have, like for me, it was a 20x net worth jump in 4 years, right? And that's absolutely possible no matter what your career is, right? But it has to do with, you're able to see the opportunities because you've prepared and you've got your mindset in things like, I call them wealth whisperings, these things that you do, these practices. They sound weird, but again, almost everybody I know that's worth over 10 million has some sort of practice where they say things to themselves intentionally to create this person that they want to show up as. So there's a lot we can go into our own mindset, but just this idea of wealth worthiness and really creating it through these whisperings of the things we tell ourselves is really critical.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit beforehand. When we originally came in, we thought Rich Brain was just one book, and you told us beforehand, like once you got down and started sitting down to write it, you realized it's probably better as 2 or 3 books. Correct?
Yeah. I basically wrote 95% of the book, and then I was like, I'm just trying to do too much in this book, and those are Rich Brain, Rich Habits, and then Rich Networks. 3 books.
So which one's going to come out first?
Rich Brain. Yeah. I'm hoping it will come out this year. I've got to get cracking. We've got a lot of things we're doing on the business side, but it's like the labor of love. I think everybody should write a book at least once because it's very clarifying, but it just takes the time to sit down and do it.
One of the, you brought up before you moved on, you talked about the groups of passive investors and things like that. One of the challenges of syndications is it's a very opaque market. And so really the only way that most people find out about an opportunity is through another passive investor, or God forbid, clicking on a meta ad. But at the same time, it's so often that people don't really have a lot of information about the true performance. You can look at some of the big operators right now in multifamily, and they're good operators. But then, like, you dig in, and they've had their challenges right now too, and you don't often see, all right, what was their real performance? They're going to give you their pro forma, just like we when we're pitching a deal to people, we're giving people our pro forma. We're making our best guess about what we're seeing in the market right now and what we think we can do. And by the same token, these multifamily operators, even the ones who were very diligent about what they were doing, they got caught unaware by market forces beyond their control. And I guess what I'm saying is the power of, you're not going to find passive investors typically at the local RIA. That is typically going to be house flippers, single family, people, and maybe Airbnb people. Screw those people.
That's me.
Yeah. So I guess the actionable thing I'm looking for from you is, how does a aspiring passive investor find that community of other passive investors?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I think it's something we should really we tend to undervalue this because we're busy and we have a lot going on, and I don't want to but the challenge is, if you don't really make an effort and spend money and time to build your network, you will find a place where you would have made a better decision had you run that by somebody, right? You would go back, oh man, and you'll find out later, like, oh man, I told about this deal, and like, well, I could have told you that kind of, like there's a reputation it's a big deal. People do talk and they share a lot as far as what's, who are the good operators and who are not. So I think going to conferences, you just mentioned you were at the Best Ever conference. That's a great conference to go to. The other conferences to go to. I like paying to be in rooms. I'm part of multiple masterminds. A mastermind group is a paid group. People join for a specific reason. Like I mentioned, we have the Wealth Forum, which does that. There's other groups out there that are specifically dedicated for passive investors. And these are high ticket. These are tens of thousands of dollars typically to join these groups for the year. And like, why would you do something like that? Well, it's because I know if I get one deal, if I'm in the round, like it also is a filter of who's going to be in the room. Like the local RIA, if it's free to get in or it's $20, like it's going to be a certain type of investor. But if everybody's paying thousands of dollars, like you're going to get that value out of it. You're going to find a way to, and everybody else is going to come with that same desire and hunger. So when people, when I pay, I pay attention and I contribute, and I'm doing all the stuff and things like that. So I think that it's something that people will say, what am I getting for that? What if I just put this money into a deal? And it's like, well, you could certainly do that, but I really believe the best investment you make is not in a deal, it's in your own education. Like Warren Buffett says, invest in yourself. Like by you learning something, even if you're 70 or 80 or 75 years old, if you're learning, you're growing, you're alive. Once you stop learning, I think you start decaying, you start dying both in your mind and your body. And so I think just being in a place where you can be around others and learn is huge.
I couldn't agree more. I also think that right now we have a better opportunity for networking and education than we ever have in the history of the planet. Everybody's got a smartphone. 10 years ago, we would not be connecting right now and talking about this. The fact that we have the opportunity of any question, it used to be, it was amazing when you had a question and you could just pull out your phone and Google it. And then it was, well, I can just pull out my phone and I can go to YouTube and I can see a video. And now it's like, well, ChatGPT knows everything I'm possibly going to, like, it's changing so rapidly and quickly. But the same can be said for our ability to network. And if you have questions about your life and the answer is, I don't know, that's okay, because it implies ambiguity. And ambiguity is just a lack of education. Education is free these days. You can network just about anywhere you want. If you want to take it to the next level, take it to the point of being paid education, because then everyone in that room has given up something to be there, right? The money that they spent to be in that room is a representation of their life energy that they likely spent time away from the people that they love to make that money. And if they're willing to invest it into themselves and into that room, that's the kind of room that you want to be in. Couldn't agree more with that. And we all talk about, like you are right now, who you're going to be 10 years from now, with the exception of the places you go, the people you meet, the content that you consume, and the books that you read. Right. So that law of 100 hours is something that I keep bringing up to people of, if you spend 100 hours studying something, you're going to know more about that subject than 99% of the population. 100 hours is only 18 minutes a day in the car, which is less than the average commute. So within a year, you have an opportunity to use time that's otherwise likely being squandered to put yourself in a position where you're going to know more in that process, you're also going to identify other groups that you can connect with. And when you do it, by then, hopefully you do it in a way that you're able to contribute and give back to the people around you. And it comes with, a lot of times those groups all come with an abundance mindset. Everybody's not only there to get something, but they're there to humbly share, sometimes not so humbly share. But either way, like to impart value and to help. So that's really powerful. I think I love the fact that you've written what's a book that's turned into a second book and it's turned into a series of books. I'm excited to read that. One of the things that's really cool is that, like with a book, okay, so Bronson, you're telling me that you have knowledge that's important enough that everybody else in the world should put down what they're doing and read what you have to say. The reality is, yes, because of your experience and what you've done, but you also did something that I think is really interesting, is that you interviewed 2,500 millionaires in the process of researching your book, right? Everybody's got their own perspective and view on the world. For you to collectively take a population and condense that down to some commonalities, I think is really valuable. So talk to me a little bit about that process and how you did that. But more importantly, like, what was surprising about that? What were the common traits that you saw? What were the beliefs that you saw? What were the challenges that came out of that? Like, I'm not asking you to spoil your book, but give us some teasers here of like, what are some of the things that came out of that you think are really valuable?
Yeah. So I mentioned one about the wealth worthiness thing that was a bit surprising. I will say this, there's a belief, and again, we're talking to more affluent people, but for a lot of people, they really have a belief in our culture. They either come from money or you don't. Like, you're either like, hey, I come from wealth and I have silver spoon in my mouth. There's kind of this rich versus poor thing, but it's just not true. I mean, Fidelity Investments did a study in, it was several years ago, and it was that 86% of millionaires are actually self-made. Right. And so I'm sure a lot of our listeners, some may come from money, some may not, but these are very learnable things. These are things that we can all get better. We can all learn. And, I've had all these calls, some of them, net worth, one guy that's worth over 500 million, right? So asking him stories of how he did it and what happened. It's just, it's not always what we think. And it's these small things that we do, these habits that we create. Also, another thing I would say, like a habit I've noticed, that people that are higher net worth and that are going to higher net worth, they're always learning. And I remember when I finished my master's, I did a master's in an unrelated field. And I was just reading and writing all the time. And I was like, I don't want to see another book for the rest of my life. Like, I don't want to read anymore. I'm done. And like a 2-year break. But last year I read 90 books, right? I have a goal every year to read, a certain number. This year it's 90 as well. And I think I've finished, we're recording this mid-March. I'm at 23 books, I think, so far. So it's like, I have big goals around that, because that should be a side job for you, is learning about other things. Now, it doesn't have to be all investment books or self-help books. I read biographies. I read all kinds of different books because they relate to each other. I read history and all these things, they go together. And if you want to be a great person, I'm beyond just a great investor, you want to be a great person, it's great because you can relate with people. You bring all these things in, and a book is, some of the ROI on a book is absolutely incredible on your time. I should say the ROI on your time for a book. Now, you can say as a physician, I make $500 an hour. I'm doing procedures. I'm making all this money. Well, if I took 1,000 hours to write my book, and you get to, listen to it in 4 hours, you listen to just over 4 hours, the audiobook, or if you read it, you spend 4 or 5 hours, you read it. I mean, that's an incredible return on your time, right? And what's the multiple on that, right? 25x or it's a very high return. So I think that one of the things that wealthy people do that are not in the process of losing their wealth, because there are a lot of people that are wealthy that are just losing their wealth, but people that are actually growing wealth, is that they're continually learning and they're devouring information. They look at networks and people and books and information. It's just things to be able to help them, and they'll be able to use this for the future.
So you've diversified into a lot of different asset classes beyond multifamily. We mentioned ATM, car washes. What's an overlooked alternate asset class that you think more investors should be paying attention to?
For a while, I've been interested in businesses. I think, we think that something comes to mind when I say businesses for people. It's either going to be like owning a laundromat or a restaurant, which I think are not great businesses. They're very labor intensive. They're very low margin. A lot of people want to own them because they're kind of lifestyle business. Oh, I own this restaurant. It's so cool. But businesses that are of a certain size, so businesses that generate at least $1 million in profit per year, up to a certain size, maybe they generate $5 million a year in profit, right? Or sort of 5 or 10 million. Some of these businesses are selling, like I said, for 3 times profit, 3 or 4 times profit, which is crazy. I mean, just when you convert that to other types of assets. So when it comes back to what your goal is, if your goal really is cash flow, there are assets that can help you get there. And so for this deal, now I wouldn't necessarily have chosen, if you say, hey, what industry or business would you like to buy? It's like, well, I don't know that I'd choose like a niche, women's cosmetic and apparel items doesn't really fit my brand, right? My style. But I've been told, and kind of some of my things I've learned is just that don't fall in love with the deal, fall in love with the numbers. And so I've seen people do this too, where they invest in, like, you've probably seen it as well, the nicest, newest apartments or self-storage or whatever. And it's like, well, you're not going to be living there. You're not going to be using this, right? It doesn't matter if there's a spa there and there's like that's great, but the returns are probably going to be less than another deal that the numbers make more sense. So I think that I really do like the business side of being able to explore that. And I'm really grateful to have found partners that work in that space. Very
interesting. I see people picking up small around in our areas. I was talking to a guy who's buying like electricians, plumbers, roofers, and things like that. And the slippery slope to me is people that are underwriting businesses from far away. And when I'm local, I can see that the person running the business is the business. That's a potential pitfall. Like if it's really, really relationship based, that's scary to me, because that guy can be the business. And when he walks away, a lot of the numbers walk away, versus something like e-commerce or things like that, where like the sales are the sales, right? And that's a potential pitfall. I'm interested in watching that over the next 5 to 7 years, because I think eventually the sheep and the goats are going to be separated there. It'll be interesting to see how that happens.
And there's some books out about it too. That's books I can recommend, but it's the same thing that happens with a physician's practice, right? So a physician has a practice. It's like Michael Gerber has a great book. If people haven't read it, it's called The E-Myth. It's an older classic book. And it basically says that a lot of people start working, and as a physician, you work and you got this business, whatever, but then you realize you don't have a business, you got a job, right? And so that exists in businesses as well. It's like you want to have a business large enough that can support having people run it. And like the business that we're buying now is e-commerce. It has, a few full-time employees. The owners, there's two of them, the two founders. They've been in the business about 10 hours a week. They've created such great processes and systems that it is scalable. Now, if it was a restaurant and there were 4 or 5 employees, that would be very difficult. I'd be in a restaurant all the time, and I don't want to do that, right? I want to have things that will actually, as you said, create truly passive income, where it's more passive, right? And so, but it depends how the business is run. There's a lot of things to think about, but that's why I like the e-commerce genre in general.
My perspective on what makes a business has changed over the last 10 years. I remember, back in the day, I was trying to start little businesses, that would have just turned into jobs, and a business, really, you don't have a business unless you have assets, systems, and processes. Otherwise, like you said, you just own a job. I have a good friend who's a lighting designer who was making a phenomenal living for a long time, because everything that, he would basically design a lighting fixture. It would go off to, a manufacturer. They'd test all different designs. And then that design would end up in Home Depot or some home goods store. And then he was earning this residual payment off of it. And it was very, very lucrative, but he is the business. And the moment he stops shoveling coal into that lighting design steam engine, it slowly but surely stops. And eventually that money stops. And there's no way for him to get off of that, other than if he had developed a design bureau that had 3 or 4 employees and had systems and processes and assets and things like that. So it's that was a great explanation you had.
One of the things I want to ask quickly is, let me rephrase this. I want to make sure that our listeners understand what they're getting when they invest through Bronson Equity and they come partner with you to move in on a deal that you've chosen, right? And the obvious answer is that they could go out and find an operator and do their due diligence and underwriting. But the reality is, you're a professional, you're finding good operators, you believe in their deal, you're doing the underwriting. And so yes, you provide opportunity. If those people come to you with money, you can be like, hey, look at this. These are the different opportunities. I'm assuming the conversation probably goes, hey, tell me what you're looking for. Is it cash flow? Is it appreciation? Is it depreciation and tax benefits? Here's the things that might meet the goals that you have. And then along with that, I can pool money together and hopefully get a higher return in some situations than if people put money in on their own. Or on the defensive side of things, let me explain to you the things that we need to be careful of, especially in the current environment. So the benefit of what people are getting investing through someone like yourself versus going themselves is community, right? Additional eyes on it, additional due diligence from people that have been doing it for a long time. And it's never what you see coming that gets you, right? It's what you don't see coming that can pop up and bite you. So having that extra layer of due diligence and unpacking the deal, I think it's very clear what the value is there. But the reality is in today's market, we've had some challenges over the last few years. So some of the things that come into play is like deal structure and protection, like not just protection on picking the right operator or picking the right deal, but protection in terms of how the way that the deals are structured. So explain a little bit what people are getting when they're investing with you into one of your deals or a co-GP deal versus going out and finding something on their own.
Yeah, our mission really is to provide investors with education and resources to help them grow their wealth. We do offer opportunities as well. I approach things, both as a passive investor that I'm investing my own cash, and also as an operator. So, again, the co-GP, the multifamily stuff, I'm less involved in the asset. I'm still involved, but less involved there. We do some things that are fund of funds. So, for example, with our car wash deal or with someone's oil and gas, we might do a fund of funds where we raise a fund and we go put millions of dollars into somebody else's deal that we vetted, that we've invested in, things like that. So we're less in a controlling place there. This e-commerce business is my partner and I that are buying it, and we're operating the business, right? I wouldn't be doing that if I didn't have somebody who's had significant experience in that space and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that I think it comes back to goals. And I think, when you talk to different people, because I've had a lot of calls, not just with investors, but also with other operators, and to be able to kind of like who resonates with me. Some people are really like kind of geeky with facts and all the figures and this is the best market ever and we're going there or whatever. And others are like, hey, this is kind of what we're trying to do. And for me, I think my strength is really trying to figure out, okay, what makes sense for me and our investors as far as a cash flow basis, as far as appreciation. There's things that, we're going to offer. We're able to offer a lot of different things rather than just one thing. And in my opinion, I think there's the idea that there are times, and there's a strength to being an operator. You guys are operators in a specific asset, and there's times that it works really well, and times where it's just, like it's easier to raise money, and it's just there's lots of deals, or usually it's either easier to raise money and there aren't as many deals, or excuse me, there are deals but they're competitive, or it's harder to raise money and it's just there's less people doing deals. So it kind of goes up and down a little bit. When you have a little bit more of a broad, like, hey, okay, what's making sense right now for this, right? What is so if our goals are, people don't come and say like, I don't honestly love real estate. I don't love businesses. I don't love all this. I love what they do for me, right? I love the financial freedom that they give me. So again, it's coming back to what problem am I trying to solve? And so I feel like that's really what we are, is we're in a place of like, what problem are we trying to solve for you? Do you need cash flow? Do you need to pay too much in taxes? What are the things that we're trying to do that will help you to live the life you want to live? And a lot of people, it seems very like intuitive, but a lot of people we don't really think about that. We don't think, I'll ask the question, which is more important to you, cash flow and appreciation? Most people are kind of like, well, yeah, I don't know, or appreciation, whatever. I think cash flow destroys appreciation over time, because it's like, it's what's going to allow you right now to leave a job or to do other things. Now, for some people, it doesn't matter. They have the net worth, they've got income coming in. It doesn't really matter right now, but for a lot of people, it does. So I think it's just really clarifying that. And then I think it's when you listen to people, there's certain people you listen to, and you're like, this person just makes sense. Like, I don't know what it is, something about them. I trust them. I feel like they're doing their work. I feel like this. I've talked to other people. It seems like this is, how we choose somebody. It's like, how do we choose a mechanic for our car, right? Maybe we go on Yelp, or we talk to somebody and say, hey, this is the person I took my car to get it fixed. So it's the same kind of thing. It's like, who do you resonate with? And, what we're doing is not completely novel, but there are some unique things that we're doing that other people are not doing.
Well, Bronson Hill, thank you so much for sharing with our audience today. I know Clint and I both enjoyed it. If any of our audience wants to reach out to you, find out more about what you're all about, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Really appreciate being here. It's been a lot of fun. I have a gift that I'd love to give your audience. I wrote a publication that's called How to Use Inflation to Your Advantage. So inflation, they're saying, is down, but we all know that prices are 50% higher than they were 4 or 5 years ago. And we know in the future, they're going to keep creating more currency. So I wrote this ebook here. This is about 40 pages, a color PDF. You can go to, actually, you can text the word inflation to 33777. So if you just text the word inflation to 33777, we'll send you that for free. You'll also be in touch about learn about our deals or things that are upcoming. You can connect with us, but happy to help. Always love talking. If anybody, has any things they want to talk about related to real estate investing and some of their goals, but really appreciate the value you guys are adding on the show.
Thanks, Bronson. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening and watching the Truly Passive Income podcast. If you liked the show, if you think it would be useful for someone else, the greatest compliment that you could give us would be to share the episode, leave a comment down below, or leave us an honest review. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to let us know down below. And remember, with truly passive income comes freedom of time, place, and the freedom to pursue your higher purpose.